Blessed are you, O Lord, teach me your statutes. The choir of the saints has found the fountain.
Shalom YouTube, Joachim here of Joachim the Convert, and I'm coming back at you with another video. This one I wanted to cover some of the differences between Pascha and the way that I've been studying it, at least. This will be my first time celebrating Pascha within the Orthodox Church. But I've also been reading a couple of books that I wanted to share with you guys. I'll be doing hopefully good book reviews on. This is for a class I'm taking at the church with one of the fathers. He's kind of like a traveling priest. He's an academic. He teaches at a college, but he's been teaching a class on spirituality at the church. And this was a book about the teachings of Saint Isaac the Syrian, sometimes known as Saint Isaac of Nineveh. So that's a really good one. I'll hopefully be doing more on that. And this one is the other one that I've been reading. It is From the Holy Mountain by William Dalrymple. I'm not sure how to pronounce that exactly. He's Scottish. He's actually a Scottish Catholic, but he follows the ancient path of John Moschos and his student, Sophronius the Sophist. And it's from a book called The Spiritual Meadow by John Moschos. And the priest at the parish where I attend recommended this one to me. We were talking about different things about the Middle East and Hebrew and things like that, and he thought that it was something I would be interested in, so he recommended it. And I have really enjoyed it a lot. He travels around Syria. He visits Edessa. He's traveling through Damascus. I think he crosses over down through Israel and into around Egypt. I think is one of the last. I've only got about halfway through it, so I'll probably be doing a review on that one as well when I finish it. But really, really good stuff. The interactions that he does are really amazing. So he's visiting all of the ancient, what we now call them Eastern Orthodox. They were just monasteries as part of the church. So in the days that John Moschos traveled, now as William Dalrymple goes across these same monasteries, today we would identify them as Eastern Orthodox monasteries. But yeah, so this video though, I have really been, I'm trying as I go through the cycle to really immerse myself in the liturgical year of the Orthodox Church and really be part of all this. And I am really bummed out right now with all the COVID-19 stuff going on right now that I can't actually participate in the Pascha this year. Probably. I don't think there's an official announcement out yet. I might be wrong about that. I know that we can't celebrate the weekly Eucharist with the church right now, but I saw that I think the Georgian churches, the Orthodox churches of Georgia, the country, not the state, but the Georgian nation, the Orthodox churches were continuing on with it anyways, and I think that they plan to celebrate Pascha regardless. So they're kind of an outlier. I think most of like the Orthodox Church of America and most of the other Orthodox churches are not celebrating that right now. I want to say that that Pascha this year, like people will celebrate their homes. The priest will probably do something within the church, but it would just be the priest and a few people necessary to do the Paschal services. But like people, unless we're invited to be part of that or to have some responsibility, I think most of us are not going to be part of that this year, probably. So that's kind of disappointing. But nevertheless, I've continued to read about it, and I wanted to talk about, in this video, some of the differences between like the Catholic or Protestant concept of Easter versus Pascha. So one of the questions that I asked a lot over the years was, why do we celebrate Easter? Like, where does this come from? The name itself, Easter, comes from a non-Christian, non-Jewish source. So why do we have this? Why do we have these traditions of bunnies and all eggs and all of these things integrated into this? And I really didn't understand it. Most certainly as part of the synagogue, we celebrated Passover, or in Hebrew we say Pesach, and that comes from the Hebrew word in the Hebrew Bible, Pesach, which we celebrate, so called Passover. So that wasn't really, that I could understand, that made sense. But when I went to the non-denominational churches, or any of the churches, really, they celebrated Easter, and it's the celebration of the resurrection, but I really can never get a good answer on why this was, or an explanation why these traditions that seem to relate to a fertility god, named after a fertility god, were going on in the church. That seemed really backwards, and I had a really difficult time with it. So it wasn't until I began to look at these traditions within the Orthodox Church that it began to make a lot more sense. And I think that maybe if you have objections to the concept of Easter, that when you view it in light of the Orthodox Church, maybe you'll still disagree, but at least it'll make a lot more sense to you. Or it did to me anyways. So the way that the name Easter came up was that throughout the Roman Empire, a lot of the pagans, they had names on their months and their time periods that were named after these pagan gods. We have that in America, like our days. The Sunday is named after the worship of some sun god. I don't know. All of the days are like that. The only ones that I really know, I think one of them is named after some moon god or something. I know Saturday, Saturn, is named after the worship of Saturn. Thursday is kind of obvious, Thor's Day, Thursday, so the worship of Thor. So that's kind of integrated into these calendar names, and I don't know the history behind how that happened, but that's kind of the same deal that they dealt with throughout the Roman Empire. So when the Christians began to prepare for the celebration of the Pascha, which is the Greek name. So if you read the Septuagint and you're reading in the Torah, and Moses, leads the people out, they have the celebration of Pascha, because in Greek they say Pascha, so in Hebrew it's Pesach. So you can see the relationship between those two languages a little better than, say, in Easter when we say Passover. So the Christians celebrated the Pesach. This was a very important holiday. It was the most significant holiday. In fact, in the Orthodox Church, they say that it is the feast of all feasts. It's not even counted as part of the feast of the church, because it is a feast above all feasts. It is this feast where we celebrate the resurrection, the death and the resurrection of the Messiah himself, God having been come in human form. So it's something beyond other celebrations. And so this happened, and it wasn't just a one-day period, and it's not within the Orthodox Church. There is an entire Lenten season, or Lent, that leads up to this. So in the Catholic Church, you typically have some concept of like giving something up, but in the Orthodox Church, it's a fasting period for 40 days, representing the 40 days of fasting that Jesus did in the wilderness. So that entails eating, in the monasteries, it's more strict than typically what lay people will follow. So in the monasteries, they eat, I think, only raw fruits and vegetables and bread. I want to say that's the case. So bread, fruits, vegetables, that's it. Nothing, I don't think they have anything else except for on the weekends when they have the Eucharist itself. So that would be a difference. You might not want to take my word on that, but I think that's the concept and the idea. And then for lay people, what is typically promoted and what we would do is that we follow basically a vegan diet. So no animal products of any kind, no meat, no eggs, no cheese. And also there's no alcohol, there's no wine. That is alcohol. There's no oil. So no oil, cooking oil or anything like that. And that is just a concept of fasting. You follow that except for the weekends. So on the weekends you might use oil, and you might have alcohol because, again, you're celebrating the Eucharist. So those are the only two. You still follow a vegan diet during that whole time period, though. And that is leading up to the celebration of the Pascha meal, the Pascha where we celebrate the resurrected Lord. And so the whole season, the whole period lasts 40 days. Well, the association that I think people in the Roman Empire had, especially Christians in the Roman Empire, was that this season was identified by the name of the month, which was Easter. So the name of the month that was celebrating this foreign pagan god, this fertility god, was Easter. Like the name of the month was Easter. So as Christianity began to spread out and away from the Roman Empire, especially after the separation from the Orthodox churches in the East and then the Catholic churches in the West, then some of these terms began to get intermingled and mixed around. So instead of just identifying the month of Easter as this time period where there was fasting and preparation for the Pascha, people actually just began to call the holiday itself Easter, which is what in the East, or I'm sorry, in Western countries like Great Britain or England and the United States and some of these other countries, Christians will typically call the holiday Easter, whereas Eastern Orthodox Christians will often refer to it as Pascha, or some people would just say Orthodox Easter, or something like that. So there's this association between the name of the holiday and the month that it came from within the Roman Empire. And then some of the other associations are kind of odd. So I mentioned that there's this period of fasting. Well, in celebration of the end of the fast, the Eastern Orthodox Christians will actually dye these eggs red, and it represents the there's something to do with like the shell and the empty tomb, and then the red represents the blood of Jesus as a covering for your sins. And it's the end of the fasting period, so you're actually eating eggs again now, and you're having these animal products because your fast is over, and we stand with the risen Christ. Well, in the Western traditions, some of these, I think, more pagan concepts began to be entered into, where you have like rabbits and eggs, not in the same sense as the Eastern Orthodox Christians. They have eggs more in, it seems to have this association that continues with the worship of these fertility gods. So that's definitely one major difference between the two. You're going out and hunting eggs. I don't think Eastern Orthodox churches typically do egg hunts and things like that. So that would be one kind of big difference. And then this is kind of not really associated with the terms Pascha versus Easter, but the term, well, the bread itself is one big difference, and that's kind of a weekly thing. So in the Orthodox tradition, the Pascha is, like I said, the pinnacle of the year. It's the feast of all feasts. Well, this is also true in the Torah and the prophets, where the Passover or the Pesach is the central theme. This is God's showing his mighty right hand. He's leading the Israelites out from the bondage of slavery. And you remember that year after year after year throughout all your generations. Well, so when they are brought out, they have to move quickly. They have to flee. And so because of that, they don't have time to allow their bread to rise. So yearly, it is associated with the same period of time, the week, is that you have 7 days of unleavened bread. And then the Passover meal itself has a lot of unleavened bread associated with it. Well, in the Orthodox Church, we also have the Pascha, and there's also this association of bread, and weekly, actually, when we take the Eucharist in worship as a part of our worship, it is leavened bread. And the reason that they have leavened bread is because it represents the resurrection of the Messiah, that he is risen. So just as the bread kind of rises when we have leavened or risen bread, that represents the risen Christ that has come. So I think in the 6th century, 5th, 6th century, under Charlemagne, the churches of the West, like France, and then spreading out into the empire of Charlemagne, they actually began to go back to having unleavened bread. And then this tradition especially carried on after the schism between the Orthodox and the Catholic churches. So the Catholic churches, and I think most Protestant churches, I really don't know, I've never actually been part of a Protestant church in any sense. I've gone to non-denominational churches, but they didn't have like any kind of tradition or any I don't even know that they really celebrated any kind of communion or anything like that, so I'm not entirely sure, but definitely in the Catholic Church, there is a wafer, and that is the unleavened bread that you would take related to the Passover, and that is a weekly tradition that they celebrate in the Eucharist. Well, in the Eastern Orthodox churches, we have the leavened bread, so that's kind of another difference that isn't necessarily associated with the names of Pascha versus Easter, but is definitely a difference in tradition that is both weekly and definitely associated with the Paschal holiday itself. So that's it. I was just talking, sharing with you guys some of the ideas and some of the things that I've been looking into. I hope you're doing well. I hope all of you are avoiding any kind of sickness or anything like that associated with the coronavirus and some of these things. So I pray that you guys are blessed and well, and I will talk to you in the next video. If you have any questions or comments or insights, please post them in the comment section below, and I will talk to you guys in a video coming soon.